What's up, everybody? Bootsy Greenwood here, and I am talking about the Reality Transurfing book. It's my favorite book still. I don't care. It doesn't matter. I'm always going to read and love and practice the principles in this book. I think. I don't know. I say always. Maybe I'll abandon it at some point. Abandon it. But to me, it's been the thing that has truly tied the room together in so many ways, all the way from my political philosophy and conspiracy theories, all the way into Buddhism and Taoism, and really I love Taoism. It's got a lot in common with this book, and in fact, every spiritual book does, right? We're talking about the same thing. I've got a whole entire bookshelf over here full of books trying to explain the same thing, and they're all attempting to do it. But what's great about this book is it really takes such an objective approach. And I want to talk a little bit about the space of variations and how material reality is sort of made from the other side of the space of variations, the dream space, the 12D, where the Mantis people and the Galactic Federation are hanging out or whatever, right? Like this whole space of infinity, right? Today, I want to talk a little bit about that and how we light our way. And that's a great way to think about it. This is one of the examples that he uses in here, actually, is that someone, as they're kind of walking through the forest, is the example, they have a torch. And with that torch, they can walk through the forest and they can see around them. They don't necessarily know what's beyond their own vision, but as they go, they are illuminating what is next. And I've heard people talk about this in self-help, where it's like, if you're trying to get from Dallas, Texas to New York and you're driving in a car, you don't need headlights that light up all the way to New York. You just need to be able to see, 30, 40 feet in front of you, and then you'll be able to make it throughout that way. And that's, I think, an apt metaphor, right? Like we can only see what's in front of us, and that's all that really matters anyway. Now, the causes and the effects, it gets a little weird here when we start talking about cause and effect, because if we were to look at it on a grid, okay, and maybe it was a causal chain grid, ignore that for now. All these causes and effects, they're certainly linked together, but if we were to look at it from the future or the present or the past, we could maybe make a case for how they're linked backwards and forwards, right? Like this is when we get into like quantum entanglement and things like this, okay? So just because one thing happened and then another thing happened doesn't necessarily mean that that is the linear progression. We could draw dots and lines to any series of actions and call that back to a cause to an effect, but it's like, which came first, the chicken or the egg, right? It's like, it's kind of impossible to say, right? And the same thing is true with how we observe reality. We have kind of two schools on the thought right now. And every model's built on either one of these two ideas, right? Consciousness is primary or matter's primary. It's got to be one or the other. And as soon as we make a decision, we build an entire knowledge system based on that particular idea, and then we build skyscrapers into the sky based on that perspective and that view. If we say that materialism is primary, the world is here first, well, okay. Now, all of a sudden, we can draw conclusions that lead us back to that idea in every single case. Okay, but the idea is that the truth has kind of got to be somewhere in the middle here, okay? So let's talk about these two things real quick. Idealism, what is it? Idealism is the fact that consciousness is primary, or the idea that consciousness is primary, and the material world is basically a reflection of the mental world, okay? And then the materialists would say that, well, no, we are here observing this physical world, and it's objective. Clearly, I can knock on this. That's not a figment of my imagination. But I can only experience it through my own faculties, through my own experience, through my own senses and intuition, right? So either way, we kind of come back to the same conclusions, right? It's like when we test for the primary fundamental particles or waves of nature, right, that's making up this reality, the same thing kind of happens, right, with the whole observer effect, which we talked about at length. So between these two ideas is probably the truth, some way, somehow. And it's very difficult to explain this particular truth, right? Because you can't say that one precedes the other because you can't really separate the two from one. Vadim says one other thing too, where he's saying that basically, like, if you are full on into one or the other schools, then you're saying that, for instance, idealism, that you are creating the entire world, right? And this goes to Robert Anton Wilson's question in Prometheus Rising, which is, who is the master who makes the grass green? And it's definitely a great thing to concentrate on and contemplate and meditate on, because it's a great question, right? Because grass, as we know, is actually not green. Every animal or every being is probably going to perceive that grass differently, right? But does it make the grass green? Or is that a reflection of light that goes into our eye sockets that our brain interprets as green? And we see it as green. But is the green that I see the same as the green that you see? And I could get into a whole entire thought loop just by jumping into that premise. So I don't think it's properly dual, right, here, as we see, because if we say that everything here is material, well, we know that there is a whole ideal world, and that we can influence this material world through our ideal, or through our mental ability, right, from the inside out. But then also, the world is influencing us from the outside in, so it's this loop, okay? So we don't want to be so arrogant that we think that we've created the entire world like we're God, right? And then we've created this entire world all the way around us and in front of us. And we also don't want to be at the mercy of it, right? Like science is now saying, oh, well, everything's predetermined. It was already going to be that way. So this gets us into the idea of fate. Oh, yeah. Fate. It is written in the book, so they say. And many people say that, and I think there's still a case for that. I do think you do have a fate. That's what Vadim is basically saying in this book, is that you do have sort of a predetermined, let's say, disposition or inclination or something that you're attracted to, that you want. Now, there are variations of this, okay? So in the chapter Forward to the Past, sort of the idea is that even though maybe you've neglected your calling, let's say that, I don't know, I grew up in the church, so forgive me, but even though you may have ignored that calling, or you didn't do the things that you would to satisfy your fate, maybe at a younger age, well, it's not too late. There's still a way for you to get the essence of whatever that fate is. There are several different variables or variations of that particular fate that you can sort of access in a different way, right? And so the script might be different. The decoration might be different. The physical sort of manifestation of it might be very different. But what remains the same is the essence of that thing. And that is a mixture, some way, of these two sort of ideas, right? Like what is out here and what is in here. And so as we go through, right, we're finding the mix. We see the Vesica Pisces in everything. And this is our awareness, right? We've got two screens, inner and outer, and they collapse together, boom, to form our perspective of the world. So our fate is predetermined in a sense, but not the cause, not the particular causes, and not the particular sets. Now, one thing that he talks about here too is the infinite points on a grid, okay? And how all the different causes and effects seem to emanate from cause to effect, cause to effect, cause to effect. So there's like infinite possibilities, but what you could do is you could look at an example of a play. Okay, let's take the Book of Mormon. Now, you've got an entire cast. You've got it at a specific theater. And then the next night you go and it's the same cast and it's the same theater. Well, there's still going to be variations in that. The idea is going to be the same. Most of the dialogue is going to be the same. Hopefully, if everybody gets their lines right, it goes almost exactly, but still there's going to be some variations. The lighting's going to be different. everything like that. Now, if we take that same story and we move that story to a gymnasium down the road at a, at a church, and they do the Book of Mormon in there to a, with a different backdrop. Now it's got a different cast. It's got a different director. The lighting's different. It's still, in essence, the same story, but it's going to appear different. It's going to have different nuance, and it's going to be perceived a lot different. However, that fate, that general idea, it's still there. That's still the essence of it. And so that's how we can kind of think about fate. So if you're like, down the road and you feel like you missed your boat, you haven't. It's okay. Whatever that is, you can just take that and apply it to a different, different stage, let's say, right? So there are all these different stages, and the further off you go, the further off into the like infinite space of variations. Like this gymnasium is, the Carnegie Hall is over here, and then you've got like somebody's basement over here. But the essence of it is the same. If it's the story, if it's the same idea being portrayed, then the script and decorations is not really what matters. That is just like that's just a decorum of what actually is, and that essence is really what's important. So we don't know what comes first, the chicken or the egg, but we know that the essence is there regardless in any form. And then from there, it's just like a game of hide and go seek, as he talks about later in the book. So it's getting into some weird stuff. I said this was advanced principles. Check it out. I've got some really good conversations talking about this kind of stuff. And then I simplify all these ideas in the summary that I made of this book. As you can see, it is a thick one, but it is the most complete representation of what is going on here that I've ever personally read. There may be a better version. I haven't read it yet, but there's so many great spiritual books. They're all trying to say the same thing. They're all saying that neither is true. We know we live in this we live in this dual reality, but above that, if we could be able to view above that, we would understand that the essence of all of these things is really what's important, not the way that they're represented. I hope that's cool and helpful. Much love. Have a great one. We'll see you on the next video.